Having discovered that kidnapped magic users are being taken deep underground for an unknown purpose, part two of Night Below continues with Perils of the Underdark. Hi, I'm Garrett, and today we're going to talk about the second book of the Night Below campaign, written by Cal Sargent. This is the campaign. It was originally published in three booklets. They came in a boxed set. As I said, it's by Cal Sargent. Now, the second booklet, which is called Perils of the Underdark, is 64 pages. It has 6 chapters, each of which covers kind of a different areas of the Underdark as the characters head through it. The book was published in 1995, and they're all published together in that box set. I don't have the box set. I have this, which is a kind of, I don't want to say a collection, but it's a collated edition of it, offered by Drive for RPG as part of their print-on-demand service. The cover art for Perils of the Underdark, like all of the Night Below covers, was done by Jeff Easley, who did a lot of the second edition art. Now, just before I get started, I'm just going to restate my bona fides for this. I've run the whole Night Below campaign from start to finish 3 times now. I've run it twice for 5e, and of those 2 times, one of them was online using Roll20, the other one was in real life. And then most recently, and this was not the case when I looked at the first part, I've completed it a 3rd time now using my own system, Journeyman Expert Master, and that was for characters of a 3rd to, by the end, 13th level. And that was in real life as well. Now, before we talk about the through line, let's just recap. As I said, this is the second part of The Night Below. I've discussed the first part already, The Evils of Harrenshire, and it is one super module. It is kind of one story. It goes from part 1 to part 2 to part 3. I'm talking about part 2. So if you haven't watched my first look at The Evils of Harrenshire, part 1, you can click in the top right now. You should have a look at that first. Really worth watching that before watching this. At the end of the last part, the players successfully find an entrance to the Underdark, which is guarded by an orcish tribe, and they destroy that tribe of orcs and are aware that what is going on is that a group of monsters are on the surface, bandits, orcs, are capturing magic users for some unknown purpose and taking them deep underground. And now, at the beginning of part 2, the Underdark lies in front of them. That's what part 2 is. It's a journey through the Underdark. Now, just a couple of a recap about the overall kind of like meta, well, not the meta plot, but the overall plot that ties all 3 together. What's going on is that the Aboleth, this race of kind of subterranean psionic aberrants, are building this enormous structure in a city deep in the Underdark that they call the Tower of Domination. And when this is completed, it will allow them to extend their psionic influence, which is kind of a hypnotic kind of psychic domination, to the surface world. They can do this close to themselves, but they can't extend it to the surface yet. To build the Tower of Domination, to power it, they need the blood and souls of magic users. So they are abducting them and they are taking them below. Their main lieutenants, there is different races that are different groups of different species, different monsters that are aligned with them, but their most trusted lieutenants are mind flayers. And they are kind of overseeing the abduction of intelligent humanoid spellcasters and taking them below. This part, it's part 2, Perils of the Underdark. At the start of the module, the characters are approached, just having destroyed those orcs, they're approached by a Svirfneblin called Carmenerin and her party. They inform the party that they need to equip themselves and they need to seem prepared for what's coming, because entering the Underdark is going to be really, really, really dangerous and really unpleasant, and it's going to be, they're not going to have the opportunity to go to the surface and come back again over and over again. The Deep Gnomes are concerned because they're aware that the Mind Flayers are aiding the whatever it is snatching these magic users, but the Mind Flayers, they know that the Mind Flayers are in league with it, and the Svirfneblin are equally aware that if their city maze, their home, gets discovered by the Mind Flayers, they're looking at the total annihilation of their people. Now, the player characters will resupply, come back, meet Carmena, and be taken to the Svirfneblin city maze, where they're informed of some of these things, like the presence of Mind Flayers, Illithids in the Underdark, and they will be made aware of possibly of the location of a huge underground fortress city known as the City of the Glass Pool, which is a stop-off point for abducted wizards who are being taken below. Now, before they tell the players this, the deep gnomes, the Svirfneblin, have to feel like they can trust the players because their community exists in an extremely hostile environment. So what they might do is there's a couple of things they might ask of the players before they reveal everything that they know. But similarly as well, it's quite easy for players who are particularly greedy and avaricious to kind of end up stealing treasures from places where they shouldn't, or offending the deep gnomes in some way that will just get them shut out of that community anyway. So some of the things they might be asked to do. Well, there's two close to the Svirfneblin city maze. There's two warring factions of the trolls. They have great names as the Slaverers, which have these like disgusting underbites and slobber constantly, and some the other tribe of trolls called the Top Knots, which are kind of like these these trolls with big black top knots, and it's really 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 cool. So dealing with those might be helpful. For the Svirfneblin, that might get them to reveal a little bit more. The thing about the trolls, though, is that the book actually admits that dealing with the trolls is just a hack and slay kind of gathering. You're given a map of a few caverns, you go and kill all the trolls, and then you can go back. One thing that it does do about this particular kind of minor kind of side quest, it rather irritatingly tells us that the two groups' mutual animosity for each other, the Slaverers and the Top Knots, it can't be exploited by the players. They just hate everyone. I'm like, yeah, we're not doing that. Like, if the players are able to convince one side to destroy the other, or get them to move, whatever, I think that is something that the player should be able to do. Because otherwise, one thing that you'll find with this module is that, and I'll come back to this, but one thing that you'll find is that there is a lot of fighting. And if you don't give the opportunity for parley and negotiation and manipulation and intrigue, they're going to go from room to room to room, session to session to session, killing stuff. And that might be fine for a bit, but it's also going to get quite boring after a while. There's other various factions. Oh, one thing, the Deep Gnomes also know of a group of Darrow, a kind of type of deep dwarf that they hate. And they hate them because the book explains that their creation myth kind of is conflicted with the Deep Gnomes' own. So the Darrow, who are in league with the City of the Glass Pool and the Mind Flayers, they can be exploited and manipulated as well because they're kind of a servitor race for a slave kind of like culture for the Mind Flayers. But that's something else that the players can help with and deal with for the Svirfneblin. Lots of stuff going on. There's also lots of other factions in this area of the Underdark that a kind of a good group of adventurers, a canny group of adventurers could exploit. So there's a hive of Grell, which are kind of capturing troglodytes and deep gnomes and orcs and whatever else, the occasional adventurer, and they're feeding them to a deep spawn, which is this great monster that lives on the edge of their lands. And the Grell Patriarch is having to kind of behave, even though Grell are very alien creatures, it has to behave very carefully so that it doesn't annoy this deep spawn that lives within its lands. It's a kind of non-negotiated peace between the two. There's also a Behir, which I think is really cool. There's a Behir that has made its nest near a shadow dragon, and obviously Behir and dragons they hate each other. And the dragon doesn't know the Behir's here, and the dragon is much more powerful than the Behir. So what's going on is the Behir would really like to get hold of the dragon's treasure. So that can be quite cool. And every time I've run this, players have always ended up doing that. It's actually quite out of the way on the map, but it's something that players find really engaging. There's also an enigmatic group of elves who are the Rockseer elves. And what's interesting is that they're good aligned like dark elves that live underground. Now, dealing with all these different factions and all these kind of mini dungeons that are laid out in the Underdark, the players will eventually realize that they have to make their way along the long path, which is a really arduous, grueling, and punishing tunnel system, like Ancient Highway, that leads to the City of the Glass Pool. And that's where the module culminates, at the City of the Glass Pool, which is an enormous Kuo-Toa fortress city run by the Mind Flayers. The city is a stop-off point for abducted magic users, and it's a fortress that guards the entrance through the deeper Underdark. Through fighting or stealth, the players eventually kind of deal with the city, and then that's the climax of Book 2, and then they get to begin Book 3. So what do I like about this module? There's actually loads to like about this. I'm just going to preface all of this by saying this is the weakest of the three. It's a great It's a great adventure. It's a great. The whole thing is a great campaign. But let's just call a spade and say that this is the weakest one, and for a couple of reasons that I'll come on to in a minute. But let's talk about what I like. There's loads of small dungeons that you're given. There's troll dungeons, Grail dungeons, Darrow dungeons, Quaggoth dungeons, slime and ooze areas where there's kind of like aspects of Jubilex, the god of slimes. There's also ropers. There's all sorts of stuff going on, and the players get to experience what I think you would want to experience if you've signed up to play an Underdark campaign. All those different things, and it doesn't kind of skimp on any particular aspect of what you'd expect to find in the Underdark. There's also some really good kind of minor descriptive elements that key you into how to describe the Underdark, talking about underwater areas and kind of strange mossy in slugs and albino spiders that skitter away from the light and things like that. There's lots of cool stuff like that. There's a really good set of random encounter tables that really evoke a sense of threat. And it's a good thing that as we played on, my players were kind of panicked by the thought of a random encounter. Another thing that's really good about this module is that it can be dropped into any setting. If you want to run an Underdark campaign, you could just move the entrance of the Underdark in this module to anywhere you want. And you could just, if you wanted, you could have the City of the Glass Pool as the end of the adventure. It's a very modular module. It's a very modular segment of this adventure. It's a very modular kind of adventure generally. There's a couple of other things. I really like the idea that there are like good aligned dark elves, the Roxia elves. I think that one thing that does is it allows you to extract this. It just go back to what I was just saying. It allows you to extract this module from the Forgotten Realms, from Drizzt, from Menzoberranzan, and the way dark elves are presented in the Forgotten Realms in Faerun. It lets you drop it in kind of anywhere because I think that there's certain things like the way Dark Elves are presented in Faerun, which really keys in the Underdark to that particular setting. And in not having them included, it means that you can still set it in Faerun, but you could set it in your world, or you could set it in Greyhawk, or any other setting quite easily. There is quite a lot of factional play in this, despite the fact that we're told that the two troll factions, there's nothing the players can do to negotiate with them. There is actually quite a good spread of factional play. There's different groups that feel different amounts of animosity to their neighbours and to the people that live with them. And that's something that a canny group is going to be able to exploit. And it's something that a canny game master is going to be sensitive to and able to set up these kinds of interactions. There's a really great sense of hostility to the Underdark in this module, and I love that. The Sverfnebelin are really concerned that the location of their home is going to be revealed to the Mind Flayers. They go to great lengths to kind of prevent this, and it's something that if it, there's a description, quite clear instructions for what happens if the Sverfnebelin find out that their city maze has been revealed. The setting is borders on the alien, and that's exactly how the Underdark should be. And also, one minor thing that's really useful is some of the areas of battle, particularly in and around the City of the Glass Pool, have been hand painted. There is a battle map provided that, even in this book, which prints all the maps really weirdly. It's the only thing that's bad about this is that the maps are not printed properly. You can print them manually and then just like tape them together, and it's really nice to be able to go, okay, this is what the temple in the City of the Glass Pool looks like. And if you're playing on a grid, there's a 5-foot grid set on it, which is really, really helpful. I really like the City of the Glass Pool as a location. It's very kind of aquatic and mossy and almost kind of like, I don't know, very oozy and slimy. There's lots of waterways. And of course it would be because it's a Kuatoa city, right? And their goddess, whose name I always struggle to pronounce, there's the Kuatoa goddess who's got this great statue, and she's Blibdilploop. That's it, Blibdilploop. And she's got a statue, and it's like a lobster-headed woman with like claws. And it's like, oh man, this is like grisly and grey. So there's loads of stuff to like. Now, what did I change, and what concerns would a game master have? There's loads of combat. Number one, we can't negotiate our way out of all of it, right? There's tons and tons of combat. It's the standard way of dealing with problems down here, and that's partly because it's not an oversight of Carl Sargent's. It is just the nature of the extreme hostility of the Underdark. And that's okay. So that's just one thing to keep, if players don't enjoy that, it can be boring. just making sure that you have a group that is going to enjoy kind of lots and lots of combat and lots of tactical combat, right? You should be aware as a game master, giving some thought to the locations in where combat is going to occur, so then you can make it as engaging as possible. The other thing is that the long path, the highway that the players have got to head down, it is kind of somewhat repetitive. It is long. It's clearly there to drain player character resources. And one thing I found when I ran this in 5e is that because of healing to max HP after a long rest, and the restoration of all your abilities after just one day, the long path doesn't work the way it should, because it's supposed to be a kind of attritional experience as they become kind of characters get weaker and weaker as they go along it. I would change that quite significantly, and make sure that you can make sure that just say this is the mythic underworld, right? This place is inimical to your very soul, and you can't restore hit points while you're down here non-magically, or you get like one back, or like your constitution modifier back per long rest, something like that, and that will mitigate, or that will bring the experience if you're running this with 5e closer to what Sergeant intended. I would be considering converting the map to a point crawl, because otherwise you're going to be working out how many miles they can travel each day. Just take all the locations and put them onto a map and draw a line between them. I think that's probably going to be the easiest way to handle travel down here. The other thing is that, and this was quite a significant change, and I didn't make this change when I ran it for 5e. I said I ran it twice for 5e, and it's important to say that I ran it concurrently. Those two campaigns I was running like on Friday evenings, I was running it for one group, and then on Saturdays I was running it for another group. So I wasn't able to reflect on what was working and what wasn't as I was running it. And then when I ran it for Journeyman Expert Master just over the last couple of months, I was like, okay, so what worked when I last ran it and what didn't? And one thing that I found was that players want to be able to return to the surface, and the game basically says you're not going to be able to do that. So I thought, okay, well, I don't like that. So I came up with this idea of there's these flux points throughout the map that let you teleport around the map if they find them. There's not so many of them. So what I did, first of all, is I added flux points to like several more major locations that the players can find, including the Svirfneblin City Maze. And then I said that the flux points could be used. There's a spell in my game, Journeyman Expert Master, called Felicitous Sanctuary, that basically lets you choose a home base, and then you can spend FP, which is your spellcasting resource, to teleport yourself and your allies to your home base. And I said, the problem with it is that you're so many miles on the ground that normally you won't be able to cast Felicitous Sanctuary to get out. But I said, okay, these flux points, if you touch them, they reduce the amount of FP you've got to spend to get to your Felicitous Sanctuary, your home base, by like 4, or it effectively increases the range by 4, and that let them teleport in and out of the Underdark. They really enjoyed that. And one thing that did allow me to do was just punctuate these long, I said there's lots of combat, punctuate these long sessions of lots of combat and fighting and Underdark travel with other things, right? So obviously, as the campaign heats up, one thing I want to do is be able to communicate to the players that deep underground, while they're deep underground, on the surface, the Mind Flayers are still capturing more and more and more magic users. It's something that they're hastening. So I actually, and I mentioned this in my review of the completely unrelated OSR module, Curse of the Maggot God. You can see my review and talk through of it if you click on the top right now. I ran that module in the middle of it, and that was when the players were in this segment of the adventure, and they teleported out to a major city that was their home, and they found that Mind Flayers were grabbing people off the city streets and taking them below. And then that module involves going through a kind of series of collapsed chambers in a sewer, and then fighting a monster at the end. And I just changed the monster to a Mind Flayer and said that, this person who'd been snatched was one of these wizards. So there are ways of getting around that. But I would really recommend doing that, giving them some way of getting out of the Underdark, at least throughout part 2, which is what we're talking about. I understand part 3 restricting that, but with part 2, because otherwise they are locked in for a lot of underground dungeon crawling for like session after session after session for like a couple of months, and that can be a little bit dry. And you want to be able to kind of punctuate the narrative with developments and let them know that those developments are actually happening. So that's what I'd change. That's Perils of the Underdark. It's a wonderful module. It is the weakest of the 3, but all 3 of them are absolutely fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to listen. We'll take a look at part 3 soon. I appreciate it's been a few weeks since the first part came out, but we'll look at part 3, The Sunless Sea, which is the best one, quite soon. But until then, Like and subscribe, do all that good stuff. I'm Gary, and I'll speak with you again soon. Thank you.